So Ansible, as we've talked about throughout the day, is around cross-platform, around cross-team, and breaking down the silos. And one of the silos that we are increasingly breaking down is into Windows, into the Windows team. So I'd like to invite Phil Griffiths back on stage to talk about automation within the Windows space, and I believe he'll also be inviting WorldPay up at some point within his discussion. So Phil, over to you.
Even if we're hanging by a thread, and the words you said is spinning in my head, I just wanna pull you closer.
Good, we have a deck. Hi again, everyone. I'm doing the third shift of the day. I'm starting to fade, but I'll try and keep with it. So, like this morning, this is going to be a bit of a two-parter. I'm not going to be on stage long talking. I'm just going to give you a kind of primer to Windows and Ansible. Anyone looking to use Ansible for Windows automation? Put your hand up. Right, there's quite a few of you. This came as a bit of a shock to me, if I'm honest. I was expecting mix farms to kind of want to do automation with Ansible once Linux had taken off, but I'm startled by the number of people who want to do Windows native automation with Ansible, just because it's kind of like a quantum shift in tooling and mindsets, but it's happening. And I have James Bailey, I'm going to introduce after I've done my little Ansible 101 primer for Windows, who's going to tell us about his journey and what he's done on the Windows front in WorldPay. So let's give you a little kind of whistle-stop tour of Ansible and Windows, where it's been, where it's going, what you can do with it. I think the great thing about Ansible is it's a great fit because it just doesn't try and impose too much on you. So we like to manage systems natively with their own kind of tooling and kind of culture and framework. So we do that with Linux. Lots of tool options. SSH is like the common thing to use, Python, all the scripting stuff that we love. Why would you change and break that model just to do Windows? You wouldn't. So we're going to use native kind of connections that are there and the same kind of scripting and stuff you already love or have learnt to love over the years and you've developed skills in. So why do we need to break that model? We don't. And I think this is why Windows is quite popular, is because it kind of fits into the mold quite nicely. So these are the supported platforms that we have for Windows and Ansible. The question I always get asked is, we've got a lot of legacy stuff that's pre-2008. Can I do it? The answer is no. Microsoft basically told us that PowerShell 2 was dead. PowerShell 3 is the future, long live the future, and that only came in 2008. So that's what we use. We also do desktops. We require PowerShell 3, as I say, and as .NET. And the thing we use to connect on a Windows server is WinRM. So there's a listener and a service there just to control the listener. To help you set this up, we have a script that you can download as part of the Ansible stuff. There are some caveats. It only uses basic authentication and local user accounts. So it's no good for your AD integration. For that, you want to use one of the other authentication methods there. Kerberos is getting quite common. Some of the newer ones like Cred SSP, you know, they're newer age, they're more secure, but they're less well used yet. And to connect to a Windows host, we need a Linux control host, whether that's a core or a tower. We use the Python module, the PyWinRM package, to actually connect to WinRM on your Windows hosts. So we support quite a few standards in terms of connections. Because out of the box, it's kind of growing up around Linux, we default to Linux as the kind of connection strings. If you want to connect to Windows, you have to supply a couple of details. Now, the way you can do this is you can do it on the command line, you can do it in your inventory, you can put variables somewhere in your playbox in your rules so it gets passed in. Lots of ways of doing it, but you need some kind of connection, username, password, connection type. So the first three there, the Ansible user password connection kind of required, the rest are optional. Out of the box, as I say, if you use the PowerShell script to configure this, you can turn off the SSL cert if you want to get up and running quickly on a local box on your laptop just to try things rather than mess around with certificates. One of my bugbears I don't like. So I turn it off. So then to run it like I showed the example this morning, there's a little bash script there to allow you to test it out. Again, all the kind of same toolings there. All the modules for Windows are win_something. So that's how we identify it's a Windows module. It's nice and straightforward. So on the module front, what do we have? We have 89 modules at the moment as of version 2.7.5 again. It doesn't sound a lot in the grand scheme of things when I said there was 2,146 this morning, but don't forget that's not just Linux servers, that's network devices, that's all the public cloud stuff, you know, that it mushrooms. So I reckon of those 89 modules, and there are more coming, the growth curve is the same, if not bigger, that we showed this morning. It will probably do about 80% of your job for you out of the box. So all the native stuff that you generally want to do on a day-to-day basis, you'll be able to do. The other thing we fully support are the DSC resources. So Microsoft have got the equivalent of a Galaxy around DSC resources. So they're continually developing these things. They're there, you can use them. So if you're from a Linux world where you want to do things like drift remediation, this is going to get you up and running quickly for that if you want to use that. But you can chop and change, you can use either. There's a WinDSC module for allowing you to run all those things. So what can you do? These are the kind of common things we see mostly. Installs, updates, enabling features, that's quite common. Managing accounts with AD, that's very, very common. And then the fallback is, as I mentioned this morning, kind of PowerShell running scripts to do that. So I used to do that quite a lot before we had the AD modules for doing AD management. I used to have to run a PowerShell script on a box that was authenticated to AD, and then I could do what I wanted. So the module has now fixed that problem for me and made it much more consumable. As I said on the lightning talk, if you were there at lunchtime, anyone who has written PowerShell on Windows, to me, is in a far better place than the Unix guy to write new modules, because you've been doing this stuff for years. All you've got to do is put the framework around it in terms of how we want the module packaged, and you've got a new module. So if you want to get involved in the community and make your name, if you're a Windows guy, I think you're there. So plenty of opportunity for that. And some of our community users, these are the kind of things they've written. FileAckles, Windows firewalls, the AD membership, all that is kind of driven by community guys like yourselves. Here's an example of a playbook. The beauty is it's exactly the same as on Linux, no different. So do you know it's actually a Linux or Windows playbook? Only by looking through and seeing Win and things like that. So it transposes quite nicely. So this one we're doing things like updates. We're looking for the output. So register is a way of capturing a variable, and then we can look inside that kind of JSON string if it's that's passed back, and look for certain things in there. This is probably as far as you want to go in terms of logic. This is kind of like if then else conditional type stuff, but don't take it any further than that is my advice. That's great because you might want to see if you need to do a reboot, if you need to join a domain or something like that, but you don't want to be doing much more than that. And with that, that's my primer over. I'll now get James up on stage. He's just going to plug in his Surface Pro and show us a live demo of what he's been doing. So this is very brave, braver than I was going to be. And he can tell all about how he's doing this for real. So over to you, James. I don't know if you want to need that. Or you can reckon there. Do we need to flip over?
No. There we go. Okay. Hello, everybody. Here we go. About me quickly. I work for WorldPay. There are some guys here from WorldPay I know, from another team, but I've been a Windows admin for 11 years. I'm coming over to the dark side. I've been an SCCM SME for 9 years. I get to play with GUI for 9 years. goodbye to that. And for the past year, I've been in black and white, to say. And those three have kept me very, very busy over the past 2 years. I'm going to do a demo. I'm very, very brave. I'm asking the demo gods to be with me. Here we go. Where are we? What I'm going to do is I'm going to configure 20 machines up in AWS with 4 registry keys in 2 different ways. One with items and one with it's standard. So, and the other one is there. Very, very simple. And at the end of this, hopefully, I should be able to see whether it works. I'll remove the hash. Here we go. And off it goes, and I shall come back to that. Now, this is the journey that I had, starting Windows, and then I started converting to a Linux admin. Okay, my challenges. I get to move from a backslash world to a forward slash world. One of the biggest ones was recent merger. Well, a year ago we merged with Vantif, and I've been given a Linux VDI over there. That's the only way I can manage Windows. Thank you for PowerShell. The big thing for Linux, for Ansible and Windows I found is it appears quite slow when I'm applying registry key. Why? It's because of the fact that every time I do an action separately, it will copy across the PowerShell script and hash it. If you do a with item, it just uses that same script over and over and over again. So it will always appear quicker. I will also go through my fun over the past few months to try and get SSH working. It doesn't. And WinPackage, Regedit, and some guys in the US asked, do we need to learn this YAML? WinRM, everything in Ansible has been developed to work with that. It will not work with SSH. I have tried over and over. The biggest thing is it will not copy the files across because SCP sticks a nice forward slash in the path. That's the reason why. When it will work, please, because Windows are building it into Windows 2019. Also as well, it will use PowerShell version 6, which is going back to the start and will also work across Linux. I am a keen PowerShell guy. I'm part of the community group, which operates in London. So the big thing for me that I went through was WinPackage. Everybody, if you're dealing with Windows, will be using this. How do you store your repos? Linux, nice and easy. You can have a repo manager. It's all stored on an IIS server. It's all pulled down for you. In Windows, it's always been stored on a share. But sticking in the share, you have to pass through more authentication, which is another security vulnerability, and you just cause more problems. And it doesn't work in the cloud coming back. Then you've got a chance to do a NuGet repository. Nice idea, more infrastructure. And if I want to do it properly, I need to use Chocolate C Enterprise. And I need essentially install another piece of software. The path we're going down is either an IIS in front of the SMB server as a temporary solution, or to go into buckets, because of the fact that we can just use the URL. My most frequently used module, WinRegedit. As you possibly see, I've got a small script, a small YAML playbook, which pulls back for WinPackage. Another brilliant thing about that is it only downloads one file. How many installers has anybody found which has got one file as an installer in Windows? So this will be able to find whether I've got it already installed, then decide to pull it down, and typically will extract it and then install it for me. WinRegedit is my favorite friend in Ansible, really is, because workgroup machines don't accept group policy easily, and this allows me to configure it. My US friends ask me, do I have to learn this YAML? No, you don't. I can obfuscate it for you into a JSON. So essentially you're using it, but you are really using YAML, but it's a JSON in front of you to make you happy. That's the answer. In a month's time, they will probably end up using YAML, but it's to make them happy. Now, my big question is, did this work? It did. So, my nice playbook has worked on 20 machines. As we can see, I've got some nice registry keys which have been applied. 25 seconds on that one and 46 seconds on that one. So I know they're only small registry keys, but trying to configure a base OS in an image, I've come across that I've had close to 150 registry keys to configure a base OS using Packer and Terraform. It takes some time, and sticking it into a with items loop can fix that problem. And just to prove, this is the RDP session, and it did actually change it. There we go. Now I need to come out of here. The big thing for us is it's moving away from SCCM and moving back so that people can actually see what's happening in infrastructure. I am an SCCM SME, as you know, as I've said, but people just don't tend to know how to use it. It does a lot. When you see the code in Git, it's a lot simpler, a lot easier for people to understand and people to read. And where there's a problem, they don't need a training course, they just read the YAML. Any questions about what's happening in WorldPay or anything about Windows?
I'm sure we'll have plenty. All right, there's one over here. Who's got a mic? Alan, quick, run, Alan, quick. Give me one over here if you want.
So, a very simple first question. Are you completely replacing SCCM with Ansible?
Eventually. It's a lot of barriers to go down because the big thing is all the desktops are configured that way. So it's finding a solution for Pixie and so on. But configuration of servers are completely coming out of there. And the target is to replace them with desktops, on the desktops as well.
And roughly what's your timescale for that?
How long is a piece of string?
Questions over this side?
So compare SCCM with Ansible. How much time you spend on SCCM, now how much time you spend on Ansible means what's the saving of the time? On 150 registry keys if you have to deploy. So what's the time when if you have to deploy the same 150 keys on the SCCM?
With PowerShell, for example, I was given a registry key by a team, a machine pre-configured with all the registry keys. I was able to export it, convert it into YAML straight away, and it was done. So I don't need to do anything with the use of PowerShell. It takes me 10 seconds.
The same thing with the SCCM, how much time?
Well, it'd take me ages because the fact that I just use the registry key to pipe it through.
With the Windows update, did you manage to get around the typical problem when the updates are not successful and you have to go through manually?
For Windows updates, we're building a functionality because we're getting away from WSUS. So I'm building an MSRC function in Python to be able to use that API to be able to download updates, because the environment is essentially the core infrastructure will not use Windows.
And that will give you a solution if the update just reverts back on the repo?
Yeah, so with the Python module that I'm building, it will automatically check for updates and compare it against what's on the machine, and automatically rebuild said OS with Packer, and then deploy with Terraform.
And you can apply updates one by one in case?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Hi, my name is Tolu. I understand that you can use it to do registry keys. Would you be using it also to install software packages? And also, how long would it be to spin up a new desktop instance of a Microsoft Windows instance?
Well, it all
Using Ansible.
using Ansible Win package is the way you'd install it. It makes any software, and as long as the connectivity is there to the location it's stored on, whether you copy it through from Ansible, the Ansible node, or you download it, that's where it's dependent. And there's back-end hardware that's the limit on it.
Is the reporting
The MSI package, yeah, with the Win package, or it could be an XE. It doesn't matter as long as you've got a detection, a way to detect that it's there. Otherwise, you're just doing it blind.
Is the reporting easier? Because in our workplace, every time we ask for software to be installed, we struggle to get reports, how many have been installed and stuff like that. And also, when the PCs are not on the network, what happens? Does Ansible overcome those issues?
If you use Tower, it can store the information for you that way, and then you'll be able to report back on that. If you use base Ansible, you obviously lost after that session.
Hi, just to recap on the challenges you face, because I think you're contrasting the use of SSH versus WinRM for connectivity. What were those problems specifically?
The biggest problem is obviously connectivity, making sure SSH is deemed more secure than WinRM by many places on the network. That's a perception, and it sometimes makes things easier, especially in the cloud space as well. So that's the one challenge, and based on the fact that you can use private keys with it as well. Microsoft pushing the way to try and make sure it's available and making it easier to install. Just need to be able to use Ansible with it now.
One at the back, Anne.
Could you go in a little bit into what the roadblocks preventing running Ansible from a Windows machine at the moment are?
It all depends on which version of Windows you've got. Because if you have a version of Windows which has the Windows Linux subsystem on it, you can just spin up an Ubuntu session on there and you're fine. You will not be able to run Ansible directly on Windows.
So, quick question. How is Microsoft playing along with this? Are they doing any support or helping the Ansible team?
There we go. It's not for me now. So.
I don't know if where is Tim? Tim here? You might be able to correct me in a minute, but so about 5 years ago we were bitter enemies, Red Hat and Microsoft, and they have completely changed. So they are fully open source. I've got friends that work there. They are as open culturally and technologically wise as we are. And they are really embracing this stuff. So when a tool works, they will embrace it. So all the cloud modules, they pretty much write themselves. As far as I know, they're the only write-back committers we've got on our Ansible GitHub, public GitHub. No one else is allowed to write back without our kind of, meritocracy and kind of compliance and collaboration checks around it. They can do that direct, so they're really embracing it. Now, the SSH problem is just, it's going to get sorted eventually, I'm sure, because, they have got SSH on there. It's just, we need it to, become full-featured. And then I'm sure we'll move away from WinRM and go that route eventually, which can't happen soon enough, because to do one thing the same or again on the box would be fantastic. So, I don't know if... Is Tim back there? Anything to add there, Tim, or not? into? Okay, good. Phew. Yeah, okay.
Will Sigwin not fix the problem?
Will Sigwin fix the problem? Well, it gets you round the problem.
But not fix the problem.
Have you tried Sigwin with SCP and things? Or you've not
How
tried it?
SCP, as part of OpenSSH, which you install to configure PowerShell version 6 and to get it to remote via to Linux, it installs an SCP agent. So the SCP bit works. It's just when Ansible tries to run it, it puts a / in the path which it's trying to drop it onto. Whereas if you try an SCP onto a Windows box, it wants backslashes.
This is where we need Microsoft to kind of, put that there for us. We could probably fix it quite easily, but it's not our problem to solve. It's like, come on, get there, Microsoft, you can do it.
Over the fence.
There it goes. Any more?
So in Chef, can write a cookbook which can say whether it is Linux or, CentOS or Ubuntu, different cookbook, yeah? So in Ansible, if I have a mixer of Windows and Linux system, how I can achieve this? Because is it totally different?
Yeah, they're completely different. So therefore, you need to split it up either via an inventory of the hosts or via detection of the OS as well.
It's quite easy to write that into your playbook. So just discover facts on there, and if it's a Windows, then do this. If it's CentOS, do this. If it's Red Hat, do this. So that's quite simple to do. Some things just won't compute. So a Windows share probably won't compute on a standard enterprise Linux box where you haven't got SMB or anything. It's like, there's no point coding for that because that's not a situation you're probably going to come across. If you want to detect a particular version of something that's common across all your platforms, then yeah, you can do it. Maybe it's a file in an INI file somewhere or an ETC on a Linux, so you detect it that way. Okay.
Hello? Yeah. Wow, that was loud. So one of the things I see with Windows deployments at the moment is when you use the Windows template module, it takes a really long time to actually transfer it to the box because it's making a WinRM connection each time. Is there any plans to do anything around that? Because when you look at playbooks at the moment, that's the longest set of tasks that you normally have.
Okay, you have got me there. I have no idea. Where's Gundalo? Does he know? Is he doing anything with that? He disappeared. No. Okay.
Probably worth raising in the Q&A at the end.
Yeah. We'll get an answer. We'll get someone to have a look. And I don't know the ins and outs of that one, I'm afraid. I can't cover it all, so I don't know. But we'll find out.
Yeah, because we did some analysis and it's like 10 times slower than a Linux template command.
Okay.
You can kind of live with the rest, but that was the one that there's no explanation to it, and it kind of drives people nuts when they're...
Okay, we'll look into it. It might be a known issue. It might be something we just have to have a workaround. I don't know. So we'll have a look.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah, you go.
I've got a mixed environment, and I find that the Windows connections are the flakiest of them all. Do you have any useful tips for me, since you clearly have done a lot more than I have?
My biggest recommendation is possibly sticking with the 5895 rather than 5896 as your connection port. That's the base one. It's the insecure channel on WinRM. That's the one which doesn't use a certificate, especially when configuring and building a machine, because you don't want a self-signed certificate on there anyway. So that would be my initial recommendation on there. And then then you can use a proper certificate when it joins the domain and switch the connections that way. That's what I found, a lot of cases.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, have you tried to control a node of Ansible with Windows Subsystem Linux or not?
Sorry, use it
in Windows Subsystem Linux and Linux and Windows. Ansible is working or not? Or you're not quite?
Yes, you can spin up Ansible in a Windows subsystem and it will work. Yes.
Can't see any more.
Anybody
No.
else?
Oh, one more, very last one.
Have you had any experience configuring IIS or Windows SQL? How is it?
Windows SQL, yes. IIS, I have in within SCCM, but it's essentially just PowerShell. For SQL, I tend to I deal with a lot of the images, so therefore I'll pre-install it, sysprepped, and then template the image using Packer or whatever I decide to use, and then it can just come up and I can configure it as per the SQL guy's recommendations. And you can apply whatever you want then on top of it. IIS is just PowerShell commands, so as I've found a lot of cases, if you don't want to write a module using it, you can just write your commandlet, and as long as you've got a pipe to convert to JSON at the end of it, it then will pipe out in your nice table into a variable which you can use and manipulate. Convert to JSON is your friend.
Okay, we're out of time. Thank you very much. Big round of applause to James for being that brave. Well done, work the treat.